everyone. Welcome back to Axelerant webinar series from Concept to Code. I am Trupti Bhosle, your host for today's webinar. So, in this webinar series, we discuss about different phases of SDLC. Previously, we discussed about requirement gathering phase, grooming phase, and estimation phase. If at all you have not watched those videos, do take a look at them. In today's webinar, we are going to discuss about the fourth phase of SDLC, which is the implementation phase. This phase is very important because the actual working product start materializing in this phase. And there are many other aspects to this phase. To know more about implementation phase, let's call our presenter for today, Kalaiselvan.
Hello, hi everyone. Hi Trupti.
Hey Kalai. Kalai,
Hi.
before this you have presented almost 3 webinars on the SDLC phase. So in today's webinar, which is about implementation, what are the key aspects that you're going to focus on?
Yeah, I think the major things, this phase is kind of a most time consuming phase compared to the other phases, as we know, where this is where everyone works and does the actual implementation of whatever we planned so far in the earlier phases. And it's a kind of phase that really tests us, tests our understanding, and whether we have understood the customer, and customer also will get to see the final product. So we would also have that pressure on us. However, irrespective of all that, I think the developer and the QA role kind of plays a major part here in this phase, along with the supporting roles like tech lead. So we will focus more on what are the things that the developer needs to do and how they need to get help from the QA, and what are the things that QA also needs to do. So we will focus mainly on these two areas in this phase, along with the usual agenda as entry criteria, exit criteria, and other aspects which we saw in the earlier phases.
Cool, cool. I think everyone who has joined will resonate with all that you have mentioned here about, implementation and getting their hands on actual work. Cool. Let's dive on into your presentation quickly, Kalai. All the best, Kalai.
Thank you, Trupti. Thank you. Hi everyone. So let's go into this particular phase, which is the part 4 of from concept to code. So in the earlier sessions, we looked at requirement gathering, grooming, and estimation, which kind of explains you about the why and the how part of your work. And in this session, we will look at implementation, which is the actual work or the what you are going to do from all your learnings from all the previous phases. So without further ado, we will go further into this phase. So yeah, as depicted in this picture on the right, it's never a straight road, right? It's always had a lot of twists and turns, and we have a lot of unexpected challenges. There's a lot of good things, not so good things, and a lot of adventure as well. So it's important that we keep the outcome or the end goal in mind through all these challenges or whatever we face in this phase, no matter where you go in these routes. So it's important that you remind yourself about the final end goal or outcome. You kind of refine it as well as the real needs change for the customer and for yourself. And you also reiterate and in a way remind the end goal or the outcome that we expect to the team members as well. So it's important that you do all these things and throughout this phase, so that you don't get lost in the challenges or something. Yeah, and more than anything, you will always have trade-offs in this phase, which are inevitable. So you need to decide between good enough and perfect software, and we will see more about this in the next slide. So it's important that you focus on focus in the sense that you have a dedicated flow time, and you get into that flow state very frequently as much as possible in this implementation phase, and reduce your context switching as well while you are working in this phase. It's important while you are also in focus and in the flow state. It's also important you also communicate your doubts, your assumptions, and even your ideas, and also most importantly your mistakes, to all the internal stakeholders and also to the clients as well when applicable, because this makes sure that everyone is informed of the current progress, what we are what is the situation on ground, and it avoids unnecessary last minute surprises as well. And more than anything, it's important that you are your own critic, and you also challenge your code in a way that you can challenge the team in a good way. Like you can challenge the QA to see if they are able to find any bugs in your implementation. So that way QA is also challenged, and they also focus more on the edge cases, and you are also focusing more on making sure your code is really of good quality. And it's more than, and also equally important is your code is self documentary as well. Self documentary doesn't mean just the comments here. It also means that you are also kind of making sure that your code is self explanatory even without the comments, because too many comments kind of makes your code too little bit distracting as well. And it's important that you name it right. For example, your variable namings, your method names or function names, everything needs to be named in a way that's still simplistic but also can be understood by any beginner as well. And things like avoiding unnecessary conditionals, or keeping your conditionals simple also helps in a long way. It kind of makes your code simpler. And we usually kind of tend to think that the more complex my code is, the better I am, but it's actually the opposite. If you're able to achieve something, a complex requirement, by writing very simple code, that shows your actual efficiency in this particular phase. Because however complex it is, at the end of the day, it is important that anyone who's looking at your code understands it without much explanation. And that's where your that's more important here than anything else. And finally, it's important that you are able to pivot and kind of go to alternative routes as well, because it's very much possible whatever you decided and whatever you wanted to happen might not happen in this phase, and you will have a lot of surprises. So in those cases, make sure that you pivot, and feel free to go to an alternative approach, and don't consider it as a failure, rather it is something as a learning. And still you can pivot to a less possible situation or possible approach at that point of time, and there's nothing wrong in that. We all pivot at some point of time. So yeah, so what is good enough implementation? As we know, time, technology conspires against us to provide a perfect software. So it's important that we realize that, and we identify what is good enough for our users, for future maintainers, which might be yourself or your peers as well. And it might, and finally it's yourself at present as well. So it results in more productivity for the entire team and also happier users as well. So good enough at the same time doesn't mean that it is sloppy or poorly produced code. It still means that it meets the user requirements, the basic performance, privacy, and security standards. So how do you achieve this good enough implementation? The main secret to this is involving your users right from the first phase, like we discussed in the earlier sessions, to kind of discuss with them, collaborate with them, and let them know that these are your trade-offs and this is what you are going to implement, and these are the pros and cons of this approach. So calling that out very explicitly right from the initial phases, particularly during the grooming phases, will help you to kind of set this expectation right from the beginning, and there are no surprises during the implementation phase. So you need to make sure that let's say that you have a page with a very interactive parts and components. The performance of the page might not be as high as any other static page. So this kind of is a trade-off, and you need to set this as an expectation that this is the performance, the metric that we are settling with for this particular page, because of the interactivity and the dynamic components that we have in this page. Because in this for that particular page, having it dynamic and having more user interaction is a priority than performance. So these kind of things are the trade-offs that you need to make in your product or your website, and it goes a very long way in establishing trust and relationship with your clients. And it's more important you know when to stop and avoid feature loops. So it's very natural that as we start discussing about each and every feature, we end up discussing something else that's related, and it kind of goes into feature loops, and we kind of don't know where to stop, right? So it always goes on and on. So it's important that you have a clear exit criteria for even your features, and you call out that this is what we want to do in this iteration or in this release, and this is what we are planning to do in the next release. So, and always great software today is often preferable than to a fantasy of a perfect software tomorrow. So, let's not target to have everything implemented in the first iteration or having everything perfect for our customers. More than that, it's important that we implement the most impactful areas in the first iterations, which is more focused on the business and builds them trust and also adds value, real value to the business early on. And then gradually we can increase the features and we can thereby also having a software stable as well during these enhancements. So, what is the role of QA in implementation? So, your QA doesn't mean QA engineer alone. It also means the QA being done by the developer, which is the developer needs to do, yes, the developer needs to do positive scenario testing, and the QA needs to do the negative or the edge cases scenario testing. So, it's important that we also gradually move to automated test for both these scenarios. And we run this in the CI CD to point out issues earlier on, and when these issues are pointed out in the CI/CD, the developer can also fix it even before handing over the final product to the QA engineer. So this way, we fix a lot of issues internally. Internally, in the sense we reduce the round trip time for from going to the developer to the QA and then coming getting reopened back to the developer, and this also reduces your reopens actually. So I am sure that you obviously don't want to have a lot of reopens, so this also reduces your reopens, and you can by testing all covering all the positive scenarios, either automated or manual, you are kind of reducing your own reopen rate as well. So and that way the QA can focus more on the edge cases and the new scenarios, and that kind of allows them to work and focus more on scenarios that none of us would have thought about. And that way we kind of identify scenarios and edge cases earlier on before the customer identifies it, and that way when it goes to the customer, we kind of have a full-fledged good quality product, and there are less issues identified by the customer in the UAT, which of course results in positive customer experience and trust, and it benefits everyone in the long run. So, what are the entry and exit criteria for this phase? So, the entry criteria is estimate approval from the client, like we saw in the previous phases, and the exit criteria is the testing done by the developer for the positive scenarios, like we discussed in that last slide. So it's pretty simple for this phase. Like we know what is the entry and the exit criteria. So also just to iterate about the exit criteria, it's important that it's not just the developer testing alone. The QA will also test, but the QA will focus here more on the negative case scenarios, and that happens before the next phase. So yeah. Um, so, who are the roles involved and their contribution? So, the roles involved here are majorly the developer being accountable for the implementation, of course, along with support from the QA and the tech lead. So, the QA will test the negative scenarios, of course, and the developer will take care of the positive scenarios. And the tech lead will be involved on a pull basis where they can explain or kind of suggest any alternatives or something in case the developer is blocked. So, and the PM also needs to be involved in a consultative or pull basis where they are intimated about any scope creeps or any changes which is kind of drastically different from what was earlier expected. So, what can we do differently in this phase? So, it's important that we provide visibility, first of all, on various aspects like the progress of your current task, how much you have completed and how much is pending, and also the time spent so far, of course, and the ETA, the updated ETA based on the efforts spent so far. So, this helps the project manager and all the stakeholders to know whether we are expecting an overrun or are we in track with the estimates. And also it's important that you cross check your remaining time, like I told, at the right frequency. So it's important that you decide when to do this, because for a ticket that is taking a total estimate of 1 week, you might want to cross check your time every day, whereas for a ticket that is estimated for 2 weeks or more than 2 weeks, you want to cross check it once in 3 days or something like that. So decide a frequency for yourself and cross check the remaining estimate and flag those deviations to the entire team. And also, like we discussed in the last session, we need to be mindful that this time only refers to the development estimate that you provided and not the total ticket estimate, because that includes the QA estimates as well. And it's also more important that you are agile and being flexible, and you are able to decide between now or later based on the business impact. You might have to make a lot of decisions here, like whether you want to implement something now or later, and what is the business impact of postponing it later in case if you're not implementing it in this iteration. So and also it's important that you ask for help and you also balance asking for help. So what I mean by balancing this is, so it's important that when you're stuck for a long time, you ask for help and you get yourself unblocked so that you are not blocked throughout this for a longer time. And you also at the same time make sure that you're not asking for help too much as well, because the disadvantage there is that you kind of feel that you have not learned anything much in this phase. So it's important that you have your own research done, you have your own metric of how long you want to wait before asking for help. And when you're asking for help, you go with the necessary background information, you check what you go with all your research and what all your work that has been done so far, and then you ask for help, so that the people who is helping you also knows that you have done all these things and they can guide you effectively to come out of the situation and proceed further. So and yeah, other than this, it's important that you also continuously zoom out and take a break, because it's very natural that we might get tired and we might get even frustrated at times. So I also remember a time when I was working on something almost for 3 weeks continuously on a particular just one ticket, and it was very I was getting very tired often, and unblocked, and a lot of challenges came, and I kind of get completely blocked at those times. So one thing which has helped me during those times is getting away from my desk when we were not, it was in actual office, getting away from desk and taking some coffee or something, and just staring out of the window. So these kind of small things has helped me a lot. And you can do something equivalent like that even now, like taking a walk or something like that, and getting away from your room where you're working or something like that. So it's important that these gives you those that mind space in order to come out of this that situation and think about something else, and you will get what the solution that you're seeking for gradually. So and we cannot get it by forcing it. So it's important that we give that mind space for ourselves to work on it and arrive at a solution effectively and within the shortest time possible. So it's also important that you sharpen your axe regularly here, it being your tools and your skill sets as well. It's important. We usually kind of underestimate the tools that we use. We mostly give importance to the skill set, but it's important that you use the right tools, because it kind of automates a lot of your work and it becomes your most helpful peer in your work here. So and more than anything, I have kind of felt that it's important that you understand the landscape and not just the code that you're working. It's not about just the module or the file or the ticket that you are working. It's about understanding the larger landscape, how your module contributes to the entire site, how different modules interact, and finally how it also benefits the customer for business, and particularly about the infrastructure as well, and how the deployments are done, and different areas that finally benefits the business, and at the end, how the entire website or whatever product you are working on, how it helps the customer's business. So only when you understand all these aspects, you can help the customer effectively. And it's important that every team member understands this and contributes effectively, rather than just focusing just on the module or code or the requirement that they are working on. And when you're debugging, it's important that you time box your debugging and you also localize the issue. If you're not able to localize the issue, it either means that you are missing something, or maybe you need to ask more questions to understand the issue better. And you are also and that's when usually you will be able to localize the issue in all these cases, and get help as well, again, in case if you're not able to do it. And more than anything, share your progress with the client via demos. These need not be final demos, this can be interim demos as well. And that way, even if it's not completely done, the client will feel that the progress that you have made, and they can provide early feedbacks which are very valuable for us in this stage, because that prevents a lot of rework efforts as well. And we get a good impression from the client, and we improve the relationship with our clients as well. So what is the significance of this phase? The significance of this phase is that we get to see results finally after all the work that we have done in all the previous phases. And this is when the foundation is strong. That is when we have established a good relationship with the customer. We have asked enough questions and we are clear on what we want and how we want to do it in the previous phases. This phase becomes a gift for everyone in all the ways, and this is where we reap the benefits of all the efforts that we have put forth in all these phases till this phase. So yeah, let's have Tripti back to your thoughts on this session.
Thank you, Kalai. Thank you for your presentation on implementation phase and most important, sharing the tips and tricks to be more productive during this important phase of SDLC. If you want to ask any questions to Kalai or want to reach out to Kalai on this topic, please reach out to Kalai on LinkedIn. And thank you for joining everyone for this implementation phase webinar. We will be soon back with the last webinar of this series very, very, very soon. Until then, take care. Bye bye.